we're going to review the live-action Sonic the Hedgehog movie that just recently came out. Wait, what? We're not reviewing the live-action Sonic the Hedgehog movie that just came out? Then, what are we reviewing exactly? Oh, we're reviewing that Sonic the Hedgehog OVA movie that came out in Japan in 1996? Huh, okay. Caution! The following video is an in-depth review of the movie I'm currently reviewing, which means that there will be massive spoilers in the review. If you haven't seen this movie yet, then please feel free to watch this movie first before watching this video. However, if you have already seen this movie, or you just want to know my thoughts on this movie, then keep watching. Alright you guys, so I have a bit of a confession to make. I am a huge Sonic the Hedgehog fan. Yeah, that seems kinda obvious now since I tend to talk a lot about Sonic the Hedgehog on my channel. Anyway, I had always had a fondness for the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise ever since I was little. The first Sonic the Hedgehog game that I ever played was actually, believe it or not, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I remember when me and my sister used to play this game when we were younger, and my sister would always play as Sonic while I played as Tails. And around the same time, the two American Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons, The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog, also known as Sonic Sat AM, had premiered, and I used to watch those two cartoons a lot. Though it took a while for me to really get into both series at the time. So fast forward to 1999, and I was hearing talk about this unusual Sonic the Hedgehog anime film that was released in Japan in 1996. Though it wasn't released in America until 1999, 2 days before Sonic Adventure made its debut. When I heard about this adaptation of Sonic the Hedgehog, I was a bit interested in checking this out because not only was it about Sonic the Hedgehog, but there were some interesting things that were being said about this film. Like how this film had a lot of sexual humor and some strong language, which was quite unheard of for a Sonic the Hedgehog series at the time. Also, this was originally supposed to be a TV series that aired in Japan, and the 2 episodes featuring this movie were Journey to Eggman Land and Sonic vs. Metal Sonic. But the series ended up flopping in Japan, so they decided to combine the 2 episodes and make a movie out of them. So now that I finally got the chance to see this movie, I would like to give out a brief summary of this film. The film starts off with Sonic and Tails relaxing on the beach when suddenly Old Man Owl comes in and tells Sonic and Tails that the president of South Island and his daughter Sarah were being held hostage by none other than Dr. Robotnik himself. So Sonic and Tails go to rescue the president and Sarah, and they meet up with Dr. Robotnik. Dr. Robotnik then reveals to Sonic and Tails that he needed their help as he was forced out of his base by a huge robotic being called Metal Robotnik. It turns out that Metal Robotnik had overloaded the power generator at Robotropolis, and unless Sonic and Tails stop him, the generator will blow up, taking Planet Freedom along with it. But when Sonic and Tails, along with some help from Knuckles, try to stop the generator from blowing up, they discover that Dr. Robotnik actually has a more sinister plan in mind. It turns out that he was inventing Metal Sonic, a robotic being who has all of Sonic's powers, but none of Sonic's heroism. So now Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles have to stop Metal Sonic from destroying Planet Freedom before it's too late. Sonic the Hedgehog the movie was an odd experience for me. Not like Fooly Cooly or Dead Leaves kind of oddness, but odd as in I wasn't expecting this portrayal of Sonic the Hedgehog. You see, I grew up with Jaleel White's portrayal of Sonic the Hedgehog throughout the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons, The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, and Sonic Sat AM. So when I watched this film, everything about this film felt so different to me because the characters in the world that they live in was way different from what I'm used to in the Sonic the Hedgehog mythos. For one thing, the world that Sonic and his friends live in is not Mobius like it was called in the American cartoons, but Planet Freedom. Also in this movie, Knuckles is a treasure hunter, not the guardian of the Master Emerald like he was in the games. And finally, Metal Sonic made an appearance in this film, whereas before he never made an appearance in any of the previous cartoon shows. But despite the major differences between this movie and some of the games, I was intrigued by the setting and by some of the characters in this movie. It seems to me that this movie was drawing inspiration from Sonic CD, which was a game that was released around the same time that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 came out. Sonic CD had contained some animated sequences that were similar to the animation that we see in this movie, and also introduced the audience to Metal Sonic. What this movie didn't do though was introduce Amy Rose, who made her first appearance in Sonic CD, and instead replaced her with a cat girl named Sarah. Anyway, I like the fact that this movie was probably the most faithful adaptation of Sonic the Hedgehog ever put on screen, at least at the time of its release. The fact that we get to see some of the most iconic elements of the series, the needle traps, Metal Sonic, appear in this movie was an instant treat for me since I always enjoy seeing the little robots and traps that Sonic has to get through in his own games. But probably the best thing about this movie was the animation itself. Sure, there were a couple of scenes where the animation was a bit limited, mostly during the scenes where the characters are just standing there talking to each other. But the fight scenes were the best thing that I have ever seen come out of any anime series. Well, besides Dragon Ball Z. I especially love the fight scene with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles against Metal Robotnik, as the fight sequence took place in the rain, and I love how the rain was being animated. I also love the fight scenes between Metal Sonic and Sonic, as the lighting effects around the two characters really brought them out in an awesome way. I really love the way that they animated Metal Sonic, as Metal Sonic is always shown having a menacing glow in his body, and his appearance always looks so expressive and intense. The animation also reminded me a bit of the old Unico cartoons that I used to watch when I was little, as the characters are drawn in a cute style, but the action sequences are animated in an intense way. Now that I talked about some of the things that I liked about this movie, I would like to talk about some of the characters in this film. Now, there were only 3 characters that really stood out to me, and they were Knuckles, Dr. Robotnik, and Metal Sonic. As I mentioned before, Knuckles was portrayed as a treasure hunter in this film instead as the guardian of the Master Emerald that he's used to portray as in the games. I found this change in his character to be pretty interesting, because one of my biggest gripes about Knuckles being the guardian of the Master Emerald in the games was that he wasn't able to go on many adventures with Sonic and Tails due to this. This movie changed that, as it shows that Knuckles is easily able to help out Sonic and Tails when the situation calls for it. I also like the fact that Knuckles is shown as being more friendly in this movie than how he's usually portrayed in the games. It offers an interesting new dynamic between him, Sonic, and Tails. Another character that I wanted to talk about is Dr. Robotnik himself. Dr. Robotnik is, of course, true to the nature of the games, the villain of the movie, as he causes a lot of problems for the main protagonist. I really like this portrayal of Dr. Robotnik since he is shown as being hilarious yet threatening at the same time, especially when it's revealed that he had created Metal Sonic by using Sonic's DNA, and Metal Sonic proved to be quite a dangerous robot minion for Dr. Robotnik. I will admit that I cringe a bit doing his scenes with Sarah, especially when it's revealed that he's planning on destroying Planet Freedom while he and Sarah become the only survivors, and Robotnik wants to have kids with her. Yeah, isn't Sarah supposed to be like a young teenager or something? While Dr. Robotnik is either middle-aged or old? Yeah, I get that this film was made during a time where jokes like this was a bit common, but it's still an uncomfortable thought for me. Anyway, let's talk about Metal Sonic. I think that Metal Sonic was the best character in this film because it's rare that we ever see Metal Sonic being portrayed in animation, and the fact that this movie managed to have Metal Sonic in it was a treat to me. I also love the fact that the moment that Metal Sonic appeared on the screen, the movie became much more serious and intense as we get to see Metal Sonic casually trying to destroy the world on Dr. Robotnik's orders. Also, Metal Sonic's fight scene with Sonic was one of the most memorable parts of this movie, as Metal Sonic became the only being who could beat up Sonic in a fight. I also love the idea about Metal Sonic being able to have a psychic connection to Sonic, since he is stated to have all of Sonic's abilities and personalities. So whatever Sonic is feeling at the moment, you can bet that Metal Sonic can feel the same too. That's why the scene towards the end of the film when Metal Sonic ends up saving the president, but ends up falling into the lava, was very powerful. It shows that despite the fact that Metal Sonic was created by Robotnik, it still had the same emotions as Sonic does, and wanted to be just as heroic as Sonic was at the last second. I must admit that I practically teared up a bit when Sonic was trying desperately to save Metal Sonic at the end, but Metal Sonic didn't want to be saved, stating that there can only be one Sonic. Now that I talked about the things that I liked about this movie, I would like to talk about some of the issues that I have with this movie. For one thing, the plot was pretty thin. You know how whenever you're playing a video game, the goal is to just get that character to the end of the game while going through some obstacles, but there is barely any story being told, save for a few snippets of dialogue from the characters? Yeah, that's how I felt with this movie. It seems that this movie assumes that we know everything about Sonic the Hedgehog and that it shouldn't waste its time on developing Sonic's backstory. But here's the thing. Even though Sonic the Hedgehog was pretty well established by 1996, there's still a lot that we don't know about Sonic. Like, where did he come from? Who were his parents? How did he meet Tails and Old Man Owl? And how long has he been the savior of Planet Freedom? Now, to be fair, at the time, Sonic was still relatively new, so the idea about developing his backstory hadn't been fully established yet. But still, in the context of this movie, I would have liked to know more about Sonic's backstory and what kind of world Planet Freedom is. Like, is Planet Freedom Earth in the future, or is it just a different planet? Also, this movie is basically about Sonic and his friends fighting off against evil forces throughout the movie, so there's barely any emotional moments or bonding moments between Sonic and his friends that will help me latch on to the characters. Another thing that irked me about this movie were the characters themselves. Now, I had mentioned before that the only characters that I actually liked in this movie were Knuckles, Dr. Robotnik, and Metal Sonic, and 2 of those characters were the villains. The other characters weren't that likable to me, and I often had a hard time getting into them. This was especially problematic with Sonic's character, as he felt more like a jerk in this movie than he ever did in the games or in the previous cartoon shows. There was even one moment in the film where he tells Tails to shut up, which was shocking to me because in the previous cartoons and in the games, he never once spoke that way to Tails. And don't get me started on Sarah and the President. I just didn't like Sarah at all in this film because she acted like a brat throughout the whole movie, and she didn't really bring much to the story, other than being an object of affection for most of the cast. Also, she felt a bit too out of place in this film, as she looked like she came straight out of Sailor Moon, and it just didn't fit in too well with the movie's kooky yet actionized style. Also, I didn't like the voices for some of the characters, mainly Sonic and Tails. There was this huge thing going on at the time about how people had complained about Sonic and Tails' voices, like how Sonic sounded like he was British, while Tails sounded like he had a cold, and I agree with these sentiments. I mean, the voices in the previous cartoons sounded way better. Now, I actually looked up on the internet to find the rating for Sonic the Hedgehog the movie, but apparently this movie wasn't rated. So, if I were to rate this movie, I would have given it either a PG rating or a PG-13 rating, depending on which version of the movie you watched. This would be due to the sexual moments and some strong language in the film. Regarding the sexual moments, there were many moments where the characters would accidentally do something sexual towards Sarah. Like, for example, there was one scene where Dr. Robotnik was laying out his plans to Sarah, and one sequence shows Sarah having babies with Dr. Robotnik, and she is breastfeeding one of the babies. Yeah, let that sink in for a minute. There was also another scene where Tails accidentally grabs Sarah's breast, and Knuckles scolds him for it. Also, if you've seen the uncut version of this film, there was some strong language in this film. Like in one scene, Sonic was giving the middle finger to Dr. Robotnik, and another scene had Knuckles yell out the S word. Overall, I'm giving Sonic the Hedgehog the movie a score of a 7.9 out of 10. Although I didn't like the portrayals of some of the characters and I felt that the plot was a bit too thin, I thought that this was a pretty interesting movie. It's definitely a movie that you would never have seen come out of a mostly family-friendly franchise like Sonic the Hedgehog, but it was an interesting take on the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, and it was probably the most faithful adaptation of the video game series ever put on screen. Hope you enjoyed my review of Sonic the Hedgehog the movie. Psst. Hey you. Have you been enjoying the Reviews 2.0 videos? Want to get an added bonus for viewing these videos? Like getting early access to these videos before they are released on YouTube, or being able to request what movies and TV shows I should review next? Then please feel free to support these videos through my Patreon account. Check out all of the tier titles on my account and choose which tier title you want to be known as. You could become a new member on the block, an early bird, be a part of the future Bunch team, a backstage passenger, an animation superstar, and last but not least, the honorary supreme. So show off your tier title name to the world once you support the Reviews 2.0 videos through Patreon.